Let's get a little. I know it makes the whole sound of the announcement, so I didn't want it to catch you off guard by doing that. But super excited, super excited. Over 40 years of media combined for paranormal, everything from Psy to Ghostbusters. I'm just super excited to pick your brain on this. I did. I
Sure.
went through a lot of your interviews. I saw that you not only cover topics like Joe McMoneagle and the psychological warfare that we did with people like Angela Ford, um, the Monroe Institute, stuff like that, exploring consciousness. That's actually how I got started. Was I was trying to learn introspection through meditation. And then
Mm-hmm.
I sought out the frequencies, and I sought out the binaural beats that the Monroe Institute offers,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it expanded everything that I don't even know. It kind of broke my perception at first because it was so much to take in. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. So I had to get put on the proper pathway so I wouldn't freak out.
Mm-hmm.
But
Understandable.
so exciting once I started diving into it because I was like, oh my gosh, like um, breath work and the chakras and energy and trying to push out more positivity and just how that changed my perception, not only on the healing aspect, but on what we were able to do as humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited about this. And I know that I saw, excuse me, I saw on your last podcast that you were talking about the Forever Family Foundation. Do
Yes.
you want to speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Forever Family Foundation, which was started, I think, around 2005. Actually, its mission is to work with evidential mediums in the family grieving process to
Hmm.
support research on the concept of survival of consciousness beyond death, and also to disseminate, kind of educate people about that subject a bit. The organization has a testing protocol that was developed by some researchers back in the 2000s to test mediums to make sure that they are evidential. They actually provide information, real and usable and actual information. And there's part of the process is an interview process that makes sure that their ethics are in line too. It's an all volunteer organization, which includes the mediums, which means that they don't get paid if they do any mediumship for any of our events. What they get out of the certification is being listed and, of course, getting referrals as well. Many of them have gone through grief training of some kind so that they can help people from that perspective. And the organization runs currently four, it'll probably be five next year, grief transformation retreats involving mediums, some of our mediums, as well as a grief counselor and a researcher talking about the evidence for life after death, for all of that. I'm president of the organization. I've been that for over 10 years now, just mainly because I think they don't want to look for somebody else. I think that's
Yeah.
and I work well with everybody. It's a great group of people. Nobody gets paid. It's and it is a nonprofit, so it's a 501(c)(3) nonprofit people can donate to. You can also join for free, which is great. So
Yeah.
that I encourage people to do that all the time.
Well, it sounds like a healthy alternative to like having a network available to not only be able to receive comfort but positivity. So that sounds like a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and it's important. I think that people there have been clinical studies now, not a lot, but a few, showing that a good medium working with a psychologist or therapist is a more powerful grief treatment than just a psychotherapist or a medium for that matter. So that team up works really well. And there's actually just not a lot of good psychological specialty around the grieving process. In fact, people keep on talking about the five stages of grief, and that's not the way it works. It's not like
Yeah.
you go through all these five stages. You might have only one or two. They don't happen in order. There's a lot more to it. And the mediumship provides for most people a way of understanding, what's next for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And that yeah, can provide a little bit more insight into what to expect as they're passing on. Because I think you had a
Absolutely.
beautiful
Yeah.
You had a beautiful story about, I believe it was one of your friends that like lingered around to let you all know that he was doing okay and was passing on.
Yeah, I in the 90s I got to know an author by the name of Martin Caden, who was a science and science fiction writer. I'd read a lot of his work. He was an aviation expert. He was a consultant to NASA, basically on their history. He'd been around with NASA, with people at NASA since the 50s. Even knew people like Werner von Braun and all the astronauts, that kind of person. Wrote a lot of great science fiction, including the book Cyborg, which became the $6 Million Man. He was a technical advisor on the original series and then helped develop the character of the Bionic Woman as well. And then he did a lot of other stuff. And when I met him at a conference, he demonstrated he could do psychokinesis. He could move something. And I started working with him, went to Florida a number of times, worked with him under fairly controlled conditions, and not only saw him do it, but actually he taught me some things about it. I put him in my book, Mind Over Matter. He had a whole process of this, and I use his method in some of my workshops when I do workshops on psychokinesis. So he died of thyroid cancer, which was incredibly treatable, but he was misdiagnosed a couple of years before, which is the problem.
Oh no.
He died in 1997, and he was kind of a rough and tumble guy. He was larger than life, let's put it this way, in many respects. Took no crap from anybody. I learned a lot from him, even especially about dealing with skeptics. So when he died, I had promised him that I would, do a shot of rum and think about him. And he had already said to me, "I'm going to come haunt you, Auerbach." So now, I deal with skeptics, right? And
Yeah.
they're like, you expected him to show up. Say, well, the majority of people who have experiences with an apparition or someone right after death is at the moment of death or within a couple of days, maybe three. So I was hoping that he would show up. Nothing for a week. Nothing for almost a week and a half. And I thought, okay, not everybody does that. Not everybody comes back. So
Yeah.
I was driving my car early in the morning to the Oakland airport to fly up to Portland, Oregon. My car was pretty new still. It still smelled new inside. Nobody smoked in my car. And all of a sudden, as I'm driving through Oakland on the freeway, my car fills up with a smell of stinky cigar smoke. It was very clearly his brand. I felt like somebody was sitting next to me. You know how you feel presence of people, of
Oh
living
yeah.
people. So I knew it was him. And I said my piece, said goodbye, went away. So that was at 7 o'clock. I actually clocked the time. All right, I get up to Portland. I pick up the phone, payphone, mind you, and I called a friend of Marty's who I'd met down in Florida, who's another pilot friend who was retired. The guy still was flying. He had his own Cessna, and I said, I called. I said, Bob, it's Loyd Auerbach, and he says, Loyd, I can't believe you're calling me. You must be psychic. So I said, Of course I am, Bob. Why do you think so? He said, I was just about to call you. And I said, well, I'm not home, so it's a good thing you didn't. Why were you about to call me? He said, well, I was flying my Cessna this morning, and at 10:10 this morning, my cockpit fills up with the smell of stinky cigar smoke, and I swear Caden was with me for a few minutes. He said, that's not the best part. I said, what's the best part? He said, at 10:20, a test pilot friend of theirs, John Tracy, was down in Florida, had just spoken to Bob a little while before, and said that at 10:20, his plane, because he was flying by himself, did the same thing. So my experience happened at 7 o'clock Pacific time, which is 10 a.m. Eastern time. They
Yeah.
were both on the East Coast. So I was there. I had my experience. 10 minutes later, Bob had his. 10 minutes later, John had his. And then later, I got a call from Bob a couple weeks later. He started calling around to other pilot friends of theirs, and either alone in a plane or alone in a car, 25 of us before and after the experience I had altogether that they found so far had that experience, same experience.
That's beautiful. That's amazing that 25 of y'all could share the same experience through all that, and that he was able to project all that energy so that way every one of y'all could feel it.
Well, if you knew him, you would see why. And actually, you
Oh.
probably can find video of him on YouTube. It's Caidin. Martin Caden he was just a pretty crazy, pretty amazing guy in so many different ways.
I'll have to look them up after this. That sounds amazing.
You'll find some pretty bizarre stuff. I believe
Oh,
me, because right before I met him, I happened to be flipping channels and heard his name as I'm flipping channels, and it turned. I went back to the show. It was a show called Stunt Masters,
oh no.
and he was flying. He and some buddies had recovered a German bomber from South America, fixed it up, and flew it back to the U.S. It's called Iron Annie,
Oh, that's
and
so cool.
wrote a book about it. And so Stuntmaster Show was about him wanting to set the world record at the time for the number of people walking on the wing of a plane. So he
Oh.
put 5,000 feet and 17 people were on the wing of Iron Annie at the time. So that was the whole Stuntmasters thing. It was just very,
Oh.
I thought the universe was kind of telling me something because it was 2 days before I was flying and I knew I was going to be meeting him at a conference. I'd already been a fan of his science fiction and also found out my dad knew him 30 years before. So it was kind of a interesting little connections there.
Oh yeah, that's wild, especially small worlds and
Yeah.
that many synchronicities in one time.
I have a lot of things like that have happened to me. So yeah.
Man, that's so exciting though. I I have to ask. So you worked on not only ghost hunters, Ghostbusters, but basically everything paranormal?
Well, I mean, I didn't work on Ghostbusters. I had Ghostbusters kind of worked on me in some respects,
Oh
in the
yeah.
sense that the when the movie came out in 1984, and we had the only graduate parapsychology program in the United States
Yeah.
at the time at John F. Kennedy University here in California. And a couple local TV shows, TV news stations did some segments on us in like June. The movie came out in May of '84, did like June. And then I got a call at the department just as my faculty group was going to a parapsychology convention, the official one for the
Hmm.
organization, the main organization in Dallas, and I couldn't afford to go that year. So I'm the only one in the department. And it's a reporter from the Oakland Trib that wants to come over like in the next day or two to do an in-depth interview with our department about the real life Ghostbusters. And it was going to come out in September, like a month before Halloween.
Yeah.
Um, and I said, well, I'm the only one. She said, okay, I'll come out anyway. We spent a whole day, pretty much a whole day together, as I recall. I had her talk to one of the researchers I knew who was not going to the convention, who was in New York at the American Society for Psychical Research, kind of a mentor, another mentor to me. But when the article came out in early September, it was a two-page spread on the living section of the Oakland Tribune with a big picture of me on the front page of that section. And it was like, real life Ghostbusters. And that got picked up by the Associated Press. It ran all over the country. At last count, we figured it was at least 550 papers in
Oh.
varying degrees. I mean, the articles were shorter, longer, depending, shorter or whatever. Even ran in the National Star, one of the tabloids, which is interesting. And that yielded an enormous influx of calls for me, and then also I had to farm out some to the faculty. I did 250 radio interviews between the time that that article came out and Halloween that year because of Ghostbusters.
I,
Everything from news to talk to rock and roll and country stations
I was gonna
that were
say I saw you not only got on to Art Bell's radio call so or
eventually, yeah, I did.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I did after my first book came out. Actually, the Ghostbuster thing, the connection led to my first book being sold and published in '86, ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists.
That's so exciting. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
so
I do kind of owe it all to Ghostbusters. So
yeah. Well, when I was watching your interview, a huge portion of it that I noticed was every time they brought up Ghostbusters, you would pay your homage. You'd be like, I can't give them enough love because
yeah,
they catapulted everything from our understanding to like the technological capabilities and what we were willing to accept in the zeitgeist or the mainstream. So I
yeah.
was
I
like,
mean,
this is
one
awesome.
of the best things about Ghostbusters, I think, was because it was a comedy and exaggerated. None of the reporters that I talked to or any of the interviews I did, they did not accept that that's how things were in the
Yeah.
future. In fact, I normally would get asked, okay, we know that it's not like Ghostbusters. What do you guys really do? And, they would ask if we had proton packs and stuff like that. But it was all in fun. And I think that approach, especially that kind of contrast,
Hmm.
really helps people connect. So when you're talking
Yeah.
to the public, especially. Before that, when I was at the ASPR in New York, I had set up something, one of the news channels. They were doing a long some segments on our research on out of body experience there. They were doing like a whole week with independent network news, and I sat down with the producer and the host, the news guy, and they're like, "Well, so how should we open? We want to do something about, misconceptions." I said,
Yeah.
"Well, open it with spooky music and pictures of witches and demons and things like that, and then just say, 'We know it's not like that. What is it really like?'" And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
And I mean, it really worked really well. We did a couple times. I did that with some other places as well. I think I mean, if you contrast with things that are in the public consciousness, even if, especially things that are wildly inaccurate, I think that's the thing to do. Not the things that are close, but the things that are wildly inaccurate, you get people to pay attention.
Yeah, because right now we're having like a spiritual awakening, I think, in the United States. People are trying to turn to religion. Religion's letting them down because they're not acknowledging that there's a spiritual aspect that we've been neglecting here in the West
Yeah.
for a significant amount of time. Like, I wasn't even aware that excuse me. I wasn't even aware of stuff like Skinwalker Ranch, where geological phenomenon happens on the regular. And I believe it's because of the fault lines and the electromagnetivity in that
It's
area.
the Earth's magnetic field. There are a bunch of spots like that, and we get affected by fluctuations in the Earth's magnetic field. Skinwalker Ranch I've never been there. There's so much hype on the TV show. I really don't know what's real, but I
Yeah.
do know that people have measured intense geomagnetic activity, but it does fluctuate. It's the fluctuation that causes us to have experiences.
Yeah. And we're finding there's also stuff like what I'm trying to read it. I think it's the atmospheric electron phenomenon. People are starting to realize, yeah,
I'm not
it's
even sure
where
what that is.
so the atmospheric electron phenomenon is like sky lightning that comes down and it has the visual representation of like ooze. So it looks like kind of interdimensional goo coming out of the sky. It's crazy.
I have to look at that because there's a lot of there was a guy who was promoting his book a while back, claiming that that wormholes are responsible for ghosts. And
Sounds
yeah,
like Neil
not
deGrasse Tyson.
yeah, well, yeah, that's not possible since first of all, it doesn't fit how ghosts behave, and
Yeah.
secondly, he was saying that wormholes were proven, and they were not. It's like people promoted the idea that a lot of this might be parallel Earths, as science has proven. It's like, no, there's math that says parallel universes may exist, but there's no physical evidence that parallel universes exist outside of comic books.
Yeah.
So, it
Because
makes sense that they do, but that doesn't mean that they do.
yeah, and that's where I was confused when they were bringing out the AI models. They're like, "Oh, the whole world couldn't compute as much as this quantum computer could, and it's
Well,
pulling from this." And I was like, "How are we measuring this stuff?"
yeah, I mean, I think that we're not there exactly with quantum computing yet, but the predictions for quantum computing are pretty scary in one respect, in that if you were trying to crack encryption, it could take like years or a long, long time even with AI right now.
Oh yeah,
But a quantum computer theoretically could do it like in a couple of minutes.
which is terrifying because what does that
Yeah.
mean for any
It means no
binary
pri
security that we have?
Yeah, no security, no privacy, none of that, unless they're using quantum computers somehow to come up with security measures.
Yeah. Terrifying thought to think about. Let's turn to more fun
Yeah.
topics. Um, now I'm stuck on doom and gloom with quantum computing. But we try and think about better things.
Yeah.
So, oh, I did want to ask, are you aware if there's any technology that we're working on right now for the interface of human consciousness? Because I know that there's research kind of like the telepathy files that happened, and they were seeing that nonverbal autistic children were able to reach the hill and were able to gain information. But it seemed like there was a trade-off where you had to, for lack of a better term, meet certain criteria in order to reach that what's the word I'm looking for? That state or that level of spirituality.
Well, first of all, the telepathy files really didn't do justice to Diane Powell's work.
Agreed.
There's a lot of things there. Craig Weiler, who is a great science journalist involved in parapsychology, has a wonderful article looking at both sides. And he talked to Diane Powell and to Kai, who was the producer. It's up on paranormaldailynews.com
All
right
right.
now. It's definitely worth reading. Um, as far as technology goes, there is brain research going on where it's been for a while, and people have wanted to be able to figure out, can we do anything can we figure out what people are thinking? Can we turn thoughts into words? And there's been some, in brain research and neuroscience, there's been some progress in that arena. Very little, but some. I mean, the
Okay.
goal in some respects would be, hey, could we have an artificial telepathy by picking up thoughts of people and then transmitting them in other ways to another receiver and having that kind of feed somebody? Or, yeah, I mean, I think the ultimate would be a way of capturing people's dreams. I mean, that's been done in science fiction, right?
Yeah.
But given that at this point in time, there are multiple models and theories of what consciousness is,
Hmm.
whether it's in the brain or not, um, depending on whether you're a materialist or an idealist or a dualist, there's no agreement. I mean, there's not even an agreement as to what the definition of consciousness is at this
Yeah.
point across the board. My field, parapsychology, has been studying phenomena, experiences of consciousness that are not being considered by other fields for over 140 years. Extrasensory perception or non-local consciousness, psychokinesis, which is mind, kind of mind over matter,
Yeah.
idea of consciousness surviving death. We've been looking at these questions and what, around consciousness for a very long time. So we are finally seeing academics in other fields coming to our field and looking at our research because they are finally coming to the idea, well, maybe there's something here that'll help us understand what consciousness is. But the tech thing is, it's like the ghost hunting tech doesn't work for the way that
Yeah.
it's being marketed. You can't detect a ghost. A ghost is consciousness. So how do you detect consciousness floating around unless somebody tells you that consciousness is like over here?
Yeah.
You need somebody the only thing that's designed to detect that is human beings, maybe some animals too.
Yeah. It'd be like trying to observe the observer. I was trying to
Well,
think about it.
and no, I mean, that's a good point because that's the biggest problem with consciousness is that consciousness technically is the only thing the humans study that is studying itself.
Yeah. And then you're trying to act like you're not doing it.
Yeah,
But
right. It's
so then
like,
you're just stuck in a
you know,
loop.
one of the things that comes up is people are, and we see this in ghost hunting shows too. Somebody has a ghostly experience. Some of the ghost hunter shows, they dismiss those people's experiences as anecdotal evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you do that, what's the ghost story?
You don't have one.
Yeah, you don't have one at all. And
Yeah.
most importantly is subject. I mean, these are people say, well, the skeptics, well, it's a subjective experience. You didn't really experience something that exists. It's like, yeah, you probably don't know that I'm really pissed off right now at you. Even if I acted angry, you couldn't prove that I was angry. I would have to tell you I was angry, and that is subjective.
It's
Emotion itself is subjective.
what was it? The idea that reality is an agreed upon understanding of the things that happen to us.
Yeah, that's right. It's agreed upon perceptions, and there's two schools of thought here. One is that at a psychic level, we have all agreed to what reality actually is, and if we all changed our minds, the world would change. That's been in science fiction and fantasy for a long time. And
Yeah.
what's really funny is there's a science fiction and fantasy writer, Michael Moorcock, who's the one who made the term multiverse popular, actually, starting in the '60s. And he had a couple of lines in a couple of his books. One was, in the beginning, man created the gods. And then another one was some character said something like, if we all agreed the earth was flat, it would become flat.
Really played into the trope.
Yeah, yeah. And that was done a long time ago. But we all have there's a new age thing that you create your own reality. And in some respects we do because our perceptions are different. We're biased in certain different ways about the physical world. We don't all hear the same thing the same
Yeah,
way. We know what our eyes react to. We do know that, but how your brain processes
perceiving it.
that can be very different from one person to the next.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought this up because for some people, um, I mean, whether it's the culture they were raised in, the climate, the environment, whatever you want to call it, um, some people, I mean, life's not fair. I've seen it firsthand. I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to Kosovo, I've been a lot of places, but the human condition adapts regardless of the situation it's in, and it'll always find a way to keep going. And I think it's the wildest thing because it, it really it's kind of crazy. While I was in Afghanistan, we had access to TVs and we
Mm.
had access to see um, how the world was perceiving what was going on as to what we were perceiving. And I'll just pick on CNN for right now because it's the one I remember. They were showing like the newscaster in the streets with everybody talking to them. And we're like, oh man, where is she? Because we're on the south side and we're surrounded. We're like, we need to get her over here so we can get her out. And we're worried about her well-being while she's trying to interview people who are like actively closing in on her to to get her. And so like we identified where she was at and we sent out dudes to go get her. But it was so crazy that she was she was so convicted that if she got in trouble, we would come and get her. That she trusted herself to go out into that environment completely carefree, like didn't know their culture, didn't know that these people will kill you if you say the wrong thing, being that you're
Mhm.
in the wrong area and you're the wrong demographic. But I was like, this has to be some form of like willful ignorance that sh just blankets the world because it was wild. I was like, I remember I came to this conclusion at like 24. I was like, there has to be like an agreed level of ignorance so that way like first world countries can survive and all this other stuff can prosper. I mean, somebody's getting stepped on at the end of the day.
Well, I think a lot of it is, I have an undergraduate in cultural anthropology, and a lot of it is a lack of curiosity about the other, about people who are not us,
Yeah.
culture to culture. And people, let's face it, in the US, we really don't learn about multiple cultures in high school or at all, unless we're encountering them otherwise.
Hmm.
And um, the environment that a culture grows up in, or people grow up in, can have an impact on their beliefs and even their perceptions. The environment you grow up in has an impact. I'm also a mentalist and magician,
Oh
and
yeah.
I, and one of the interesting things that you see, it's kind of common for knowledge for us is you don't do sleight of hand card tricks for kids,
Yeah.
coin tricks, because they can usually see through them. Now, if they're 3 or 4, you can do the coin out of the ear thing, but you
Yeah.
can't do that with a 10-year-old at all. There's certain levels of what they have learned about how the world works. And even with adults, a lot of illusion works because either optics or because of programming that we know the world works this way.
Yeah.
David Blaine, I think it was David Blaine in one of his early specials, did a card trick on the special. And then at some part of it, they had gone down to Brazil and they were with an anthropologist and the Yanomami people. So kind of in the Amazon jungle. And this primitive, still fairly primitive tribe, by our standards certainly.
Yeah.
Uh, he does same card trick for them, and they were so unimpressed. I mean, the looks on their faces, it was pretty funny actually. And then he did the same sleight of hand using leaves, and they were blown away.
Ah,
They had no cultural, and playing cards meant nothing to them. They
yeah,
were pieces of paper or something like that. But leaves don't behave that way.
yeah,
Basically, is what it is, and that is that cultural difference based on environment, but also based on what you're exposed to growing up. So we learn to perceive things. A magician cuts a rope in half, cuts the rope, and it becomes whole again. That's
yeah.
not how a rope behaves. That's why it's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like
So
that. That's
it's really about an understanding. In many cultures, psychic experience is normal.
yeah,
In fact, I did something with Japanese TV and a Japanese medium, and we went to the outback in Australia, in northern Australia, and did a telepathy experiment with one of the Aboriginal artists. And it was kind of a sort of a not a very remote viewing, but it was on the other side of a rock monolith that he was the guardian of, and had to do with some of the paintings that he did. In fact, he did one in the moment. And I asked her to not only try to get the image, but images that were in the painting, but
yeah.
tell the story because each painting told a story. And so she got the stories actually pretty good. The images were in the wrong places, which is not unusual in remote viewing. So I mean, to me, it was an absolute success. She hit a lot of stuff. When we talked with the artists about this with Thompson Ulagiri, now the Japanese TV usually wants big reactions, and his reaction was, "Yeah, she did pretty good." And I had they're prompting me, ask him other questions. Like, okay,
Yeah,
Thompson, compared to other people in your, people and people in Oenpelli, the capital of the group of the Aboriginal capital of Arnhem Land, how'd she do? He says, "Oh, we got 4-year-olds who do better than that. But for somebody who's not us, she did really good." So they were, we in different cultures, different elements of psychic experience and abilities are taken as normal. I mean, even in our culture, if you go by the numbers of people that have psychic experiences, and that includes ghosts and hauntings, but we're talking about other ESP and other kinds of experiences,
oh yeah.
you go by the numbers, we should not be using the term paranormal at all.
Mm-mm.
There are a lot more so-called normal experiences that people never have in their lifetime. And we don't consider those paranormal.
Yeah, and we don't even acknowledge like how it feels, what they're going through, or like a lot of people don't even understand when they're going through something spiritually instead of like physically. And
Right.
I wanted to ask you if you could speak on that a little bit more because like a lot of my understanding in the beginning was like, all right, well, what am I trying to work through? How do I even begin to feel this stuff?
Yeah, it's part of it is, first of all, that there's this weird connection in our culture that's, unless you've really dug into it, the spirituality means religion, that those two
Yeah,
things are the same, and they are not the same.
not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit. Yeah. There are plenty of people who would otherwise call themselves atheists who are incredibly spiritual people. It is really a connection with yourself, with the world around you. It is, I mean, there are many ways to look at it. It's not just connection with spirit, but consciousness itself is spirit in that sense. Trying to explain to somebody what you're going through, whether it's a spiritual experience, a so-called mystical experience, which is similar,
Hmm.
psychic experience, from what does it do to you? What is the impact of it? Is like trying to have somebody try to explain to you what does it feel like to be in love. I mean, I'm bringing it back to emotions because
Yeah.
there's a lot of research on emotion, but what they're always trying to do is find where in the brain, what's lighting up in the brain when somebody is, angry or whatever. Fact is that how do you take somebody into the lab and say, okay, I want you to get angry.
Yeah.
Okay, what they're doing is like what a method actor might do. They might remember what it's like to be angry, but ethically, that researcher can't slap them upside the head a few times to make them angry. So you don't know that that part of the brain that's acting up that indicates an objective connection to anger in that person, that is not necessarily a real connection, because it may not be an actual real emotion. You could certainly not do that with love. It's just not, it
Yeah.
doesn't work. So when we talk about any subjective experience, a lot of times people can't explain what it feels like because there are no words. that would be coming close to the particular experience, especially spiritual experiences. But, and I'll get to this in a second, there's another kind of experience that's common that people can't find the right words for. And then how does the person who's listening to you understand if they've never had that experience or something similar?
Yeah.
So when people, I wrote a book on psychic dreams called Psychic Dreaming. And I got a lot of people sending me responses to a survey that I had done with some of their experiences, but also, psychic dreams are not just a dream of the future, precognitive dreams. Sometimes they're shared dreams. You and a friend have the exact same dream, even though you're miles apart. There's other kinds of psychic dreams as well, out of body dreams, things like that. How did you know when you woke up that it was a psychic dream? How did you know that it was, and if it comes true, it was a psychic dream. But
Yeah.
without that happening, how did you know? I got pretty much the same response. Either one of two things. It felt realer than real, so I knew it was different, or it felt different. Not like because it had all the earmarks of a psychic dream,
Yeah.
It was the subjective experience of that dream. They knew it was different than other dreams. It caught their attention. That's the same with psychic impressions in general. They don't feel like regular perceptions for the most part when you pay attention to them.
That brings me to my next question. So the way I heard someone describe it was it's almost as if the energy has left a quantum scar. Um, oh man, it was a beautiful reference. It was like the energy has left a quantum scar on the area that you can revisit and access.
What
I'm
does that
probably
mean?
messing.
Well,
It was
I would want to know what that person meant by quantum scar because quantum is so small we can't connect them.
yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I'd love to know what that person meant by quantum scar because quantum reality, this is a mistake that a lot of people make.
Hmm.
It goes back to the idea of saying, we made a quantum leap in technology. A friend of mine who's a physicist kind of laughs every time he hears that because he said that would be the smallest step you could possibly make
Yeah.
because quantum particles, the quantum is below the atomic level,
Yeah. It's
and that
so
upside.
small that it
It's so
does it
right.
it's like the space, everything is variable because the space keeps moving.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And we have ways of detecting particles. That's what the hadrons, the big super collider was built for, was detecting certain types of quantum particles. But and there's a lot of ideas that ESP may connect to the quantum level, and that's how information transfers because of what's called spooky action at a distance. Very often it's called that. Um, Quantum entanglement. Technically, we're all entangled. We're all from the planet, so we've all, our
yeah.
atoms are entangled no matter what. So there is that entanglement level. But what's been pointed out is, well, unless consciousness itself is capable of connecting to the quantum level, if it's just the brain, this is the problem materialists have. Okay,
Yeah.
materialists, where it's only the brain, would say, okay, maybe there's ESP because of quantum stuff, but then how does the information get put onto the quantum level, the particles or not? More importantly, if I'm receiving that signal, how does it scale up in size to my brain?
Yeah.
How does my brain recognize those signals? And psychologically, how does it come to the forefront of my awareness?
Yeah.
And it's actually a bigger problem for materialists than it is for those of us that look at consciousness as something besides the brain or in addition to the brain, because that could operate on multiple levels of size in reality.
Yeah.
So
Because
what's a quantum?
even
Yeah,
whoop, I'm sorry, I'm inter
as I say,
um
what in the world is a quantum scar? What does that mean?
I think it was in reference to like inability to leave a like an after effect on the energy that I don't know. Because now
I
I'm
mean,
like reevaluating what he was
yeah, I
saying.
mean, in ghost hunting, in the world of apparitions, hauntings, and poltergeists, we talk about, on TV, use the term residual hauntings. Psychics
Yeah.
will talk psychic imprints or place memory. It seems that the environment can hold information besides just the obvious there. And it seems that our brains or consciousness, one or the other or both, can connect with the information in the environment, and certain bits of history, which could be very recent or could
Mhm.
be, really old, seem to be louder or replay in certain ways, or we're connecting with certain things in the past. That's where when ghost hunters find these somewhat consistent electromagnetic fields that are not um, explainable in any other way, that doesn't mean they're picking up a ghost. They may be picking up an electromagnetic field connected to the haunting. In fact, we have some correlations there. We don't know why that is, especially when you turn the power off in the house and the device is only supposed to pick up man-made sources.
Yeah.
How is that happening? So there's something else going on that we haven't figured out. But just because you get a high electromagnetic field doesn't mean it has anything to do with the paranormal. You have to
Yeah.
connect that to a human experience. Michael Persinger, who did work on geomagnetic fields. In fact, there probably wouldn't be Skinwalker focus on the geomagnetism without Michael Persinger's work. The geomagnetic field does affect our brains and can cause, depending on how it hits your brain, he did this in the laboratory, can cause people to have different kinds of experiences. But those experiences tend not to be factual. Whereas in a haunting, you might have the geomagnetic field kind of hit your brain and cause you to have an experience of a figure or other things, events. Why is that connecting to history?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a difference between a hallucination where it's completely fictional or a hallucination where the information is coming from the outside and it's just simply like a bit of virtual reality for you.
Yeah, where it would be affecting on you instead of affecting to you. Oh man,
Right.
that's yeah,
Right.
because I did electronic warfare school for the Army. And so we had to be very familiar with um I'm going to tiptoe around it. You had to be very familiar with frequencies that were above a certain length and below a certain bandwidth. And you had to be able to identify, adapt, and then isolate every single portion of
Hmm.
what you were describing. But we got into a lot of jamming, a lot of we went over a lot of Cold War stuff, like how the Iraqi people were so good at jamming was because their Kurds were getting help from the Russians. And so they were coming over, training them up, and then they were using it against us. So they were just constantly getting trained over and over how to jam
Yeah.
better, how to learn the frequencies. So when we came back to try and go through it again, they were setting up like all these little decoys and false flags against us to test our capabilities again. And it was just like a cat and mouse game where everyone was getting so much better at it because you could implement it in the real world at the front lines
Sure.
where it mattered. And so it just sorry, that was one of my children.
All right.
Um, and so I can see where it would just be like this catalyst over and over again of how can we manipulate our environment to suit the needs that we want. Like I've seen what happens when people get the lasers, like the LRAD systems. If those if those are left lingering on people too long, they can have adverse effects to the physical um it can mess people up. You can get hit
Well,
with lasers so hard. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's acupressure, which is usually typically using lasers, using light for that. A friend of mine swears by this. He's trying to convince me I have to buy one. This laser comb, which has supposedly brought back some of his hair to stimulate the. And I said, it's been so long for me. I don't think there are any cells there to come back to life.
Um, right there with you.
Yeah, yeah. So there's light therapy in other ways.
Yeah,
And the thing that people don't realize at the Rhine Research Center, where I'm president of the board there, the Rhine Research Center is the legacy laboratory of the Duke Parapsychology Lab. In fact, this is the 90th anniversary year of the founding of the Duke Lab, of the Duke University Parapsychology Lab.
that's awesome.
And John Kruth, who is our executive director and research director, has been doing work. He set up a bioenergy lab, and it's a a laboratory to measure biophotons being given off by people. These are ultraviolet particles of light. This is not parapsychology, mind you. At the base,
Yes.
biophoton emission is biophysics. It's biology. It is not parapsychology.
Okay.
However, however, what John is doing and others have been doing is finding out if certain people can generate a, an increase in biophotons based on the psychic thing that they're doing. So, for example, if you look at paintings of healers and saints from the Middle Ages, from the Renaissance, they all
Like
have
the
like a glow
palms.
around them, right?
Yeah.
So John's brought healers, psychic healers, and energy healers into the lab. The room itself is completely blacked out, and he's got a photomultiplier tube which can detect as little as one photon.
Okay.
We give off anywhere from like I think it's 5 to 15 biophotons a second. Okay, that's
Hmm.
the norm. That's the norm. So he'll do the baseline from outside, monitoring things. Then he'll over a mic say to them, okay, put out the healing energy. He's also done it with martial artists who are able to project chi. And he had one subject go as high as 1 million biophotons per second, which is still not visible because it's ultraviolet light, mind you. But
The
think about it.
heat, though.
No, not heat. Heat would be infrared, not ultraviolet.
Okay.
And heat does not give off the biophotons. This is
Yeah.
something, it's actually coming off our brains for the most part.
Oh my.
There's a lot of research on biophotons out there on academia.edu and other places because other people in other fields are researching biophotons. Like, why does the brain give this stuff off? Other things, living things give off biophotons too.
Yeah, because
So
this would play into the Reishi healing hands of old.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's the whole idea. So if a healer can suddenly generate a couple 100,000 biophotons, whether or not that's the energy of the healing or if that's just a byproduct of it, is really interesting. And if somebody could generate, even for a short time, 1 million biophotons, I mean, there's no explanation for that in any sort of normal anything processes in the human body. None. And that's partly because we don't know what's generated the biophotons to begin with. It seems to be our brains, by the way. Martin Caden, who I mentioned earlier, they did something with biophotons with him back in the early 90s with some NASA guys. And apparently he had an increase of biophotons when he was doing a psychokinesis. So
I
this
wonder if
is,
that has anything to do with going into what would be considered the flow state, or
it might, yeah. That's a really interesting point. I wonder if there'd be a way to get some, I have to talk to John about that, whether or not bringing in, let's say, an artist or musician who normally is in the flow state goes into that, or an athlete. I don't know how an athlete would actually get into flow state in a small darkened room, but there might be a way to do that. That would be I'll definitely, that's a good idea. I'll mention that to him.
they might be able to induce it through exercise, especially if they're an athlete, because some find the exchange in dopamine.
Yeah, I'm going to make a note of that. I think that's a really interesting because in PK, he hasn't worked with people who do PK yet either, but I know from Marty Caden and other people, in psychokinesis, it's unlike the TV shows and movies when somebody's
Hmm.
trying to move something. It's
Yeah.
not that their face it's not concentration. It's focus, which is different than concentration. Doesn't cause your face to get all red. Doesn't cause the throbbing vein in your head, which we see in
It's
movies all the time. It's not
what
the. It's more dissociated. It is like the flow state,
oh man. So
the
the
zone.
intent yeah.
You're in the zone. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad that we got to talk about this thing.
Yeah,
I
I
hope it's
recommend.
helpful.
There's a great book called In the Zone by
Okay.
Michael Murphy and Rhea White, RHEA, Rhea White. I hope it's still in print, but it's actually a second version of the original book, The Psychic Side of Sports, and it goes into the flow state and the zone state of athletes and psychic things that happen to them in that state.
Dude, I- there's something there about it because um I was a three sport, kid growing up, and I was I was fairly good at sports. I'll admit that. I was top 200 for lacrosse, and when you strain yourself to a certain extent and your intent is like I want to do this to the best of my ability. You you have this, it's almost like another gear where you can push your body past the limits and like use all your muscles to the fullest extent. And it just feels like it just I don't know, it feels like you're supercharged. And that's the only way I can describe it to people is
Mhm.
like that's what I perceive to be the flow state is when I'm in that, I'm at my peak and I can actively just go 100% without even having to really think too much about it.
Well, that's it. You're not thinking about it. It's kind of a dissociative state. When I've done the few times that I've done PK, people have told me, and this is a friend of mine did a study. One of my colleagues did a study in a book. It's a book called The PK Zone. She interviewed in-depth interviews with a number of people who did have done psychokinesis, and there are commonalities. And one of them was when you're in that state, you kind of get in the state where you're kind of watching what's going on without any sort of emotion. I call it my
Yeah.
Mr. Spot state, the Vulcan state. It's this I'm in the force. It's just, I'm connecting with the item. It's just simply moving. And my response to
Breathing.
that, what in the moment is, isn't that interesting? Not, wow, I did it. It's like in the moment, it's the raised eyebrow. It's not an emotional reaction. And talking to athletes, my dad was a TV sports producer. So I got a chance to talk to a number of professional athletes and coaches as well when I was writing my book, Mind Over Matter, actually before that. And yeah, I mean, they talked about being in that, they knew when they were going to be at their peak for
Yeah.
that moment. Um,
It's
when I
almost like
was,
they have complete mastery of it, of that
yeah,
moment.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And, it was interesting working with Martin Caden. We went bowling a bunch of times. I had been bowling. I was a bowler when I was a teenager in bowling leagues and stuff. And I always knew something told me, there'd be a point where I'm about to throw the ball and I get into that. I feel that like lack of everything. I throw the ball and I just walk away. I don't even care because I know it's going to be, it's going to be a strike. I mean, it's just like, I don't have to think about it. It's just happening. And when I went bowling with Marty, it's like we were kind of watching each other for that and predicting when it was going to be a strike before the ball ever got down midway down the alley. So because you could see on
It's
my face went like totally blank, and his would do the same thing. It's like, okay, that's a strike.
so reflexive, you just didn't even question it. You're like, I
Right.
got it.
Yep.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Well, Professor Auerbach, I appreciate you so much for taking the time to
Sure.
just answer all my dumb questions. I'm still trying to catch my feet and trying to understand how to do all this. I hope I didn't waste your time, sir.
No,
This
no.
is this was so informative, especially because I'm trying to not only understand more about this, but see if I can help more people with their meditations and how, if applicable, if we can try and do more trauma I don't I think that this can be very helpful for people who are open to it, but
Yeah.
getting people vulnerable enough to like relax and actually get down, that's a whole nother feat that
Yeah.
I think could
Yeah.
be very beneficial.
I teach a psychic development class for the Rhine Center. I teach a bunch of online courses, and this for that one, I learned a long time ago from a really amazing psychic. When I asked him, how does one either become more psychic or activate the psychic abilities we're all born with?
Yeah.
And he said, first thing he said was, well, notice that you already are, because our normal senses are so good that they get in the way. So there's a
Yeah.
meditation one can do by focusing on each of the physical senses. You suddenly start realizing after a time that there's other stuff coming through. That's the psychic stuff. And once you notice that it's there, it becomes more obvious to you down the road. There are people who, unfortunately, their defenses drop. The normal things we've learned to screen out the world drop, and suddenly they are picking up way too much information. Just like everything's coming up at once, and those folks often need serious help, and not from necessarily. I mean, there might be trauma from the experience that would help with psychology, but the actual cause of that, it's not schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Now, it's for some people, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want to say that it's not for everybody. It's not, but it's often a matter of all the information, all the voices. The voices are actual real information.
Yeah.
It's just driving them nuts. And it's just a matter of learning how to screen that out again. And we try to help that. A couple of my colleagues are trying to get more attention on a developing idea of having a specialization in parapsychology called clinical parapsychology, which combines psychology much, much better with parapsychology and attaches or attacks these issues, the trauma, the experiences themselves, the negative impact that can happen, or positive impact, from a very different perspective, and
Yeah.
understanding perspective.
Yeah, because even in the indigenous communities, they have like entry and exit ceremonies for even warriors who are going off to battle. Like they're not allowed around civilians until they've gone through like a week of trying to get all the bad spirits out
Yeah,
through like sweats and oh crap, and spirit journeys.
yeah. There's different cultures that have different ways to deal with trauma and to kind of work through it right up front as like coming off of
Yeah.
something negative instead of waiting years and years to deal with it or diagnosing it, you know, as something completely different. I mean, I always
Yeah,
find
we're
it
doing a huge disservice to people by not having this available. And there should be a level for people to just have not only knowledge of what they're experiencing, but like spiritual understanding. So
yeah.
say, like, even if you can't go the holistic route and do it all like 100%, that's okay. You could still dip your toes and see if it'll help you and if it's the proper way for you, because everybody's vastly different.
Yeah, and in the United States, there not that there are a lot of schools that have this specialization, but there's transpersonal psychology, and many transpersonal psychologists. I mean, spirituality is a piece of what they're supposed to be looking at in that circumstance
Yeah.
and acknowledging. So, the average psychologist, unfortunately, probably dismisses people's experiences as imaginary or pathological. Um, but transpersonal psychology, they have to dig deeper in that. They can't make, they're not going to make that kind of immediate thing. We just want someone, a lot of transpersonal psychologists aren't aware of the psychic stuff that's out there. They need to that because that's coupled very clearly with spiritual stuff.
Yeah, and I think that that's coming more to the mainstream faster than people realize, especially with stuff like the telepathy tapes. And then now they're actually going to research more in depth on the capabilities of people who are nonverbal and
Yeah.
what other senses they have available to them since they don't have like speech or monitor. It's very interesting. I'm very excited to see like what humanity can produce from this because if we can show that humans can not only engage with the environment around them on a physical level, but if we can actively like change, I know there's some studies where humans were tested to see if they could have a different effect on like binary triggers, and they were
Yeah.
able to change it like I think it was 50 or 60% of the time just by acting on it, they could change the number in the system.
Well, yeah, we've been doing that kind of random number effect work, that psychokinesis work, since the 1960s. We
Yeah.
have a ton of evidence that people affect devices, and there's even evidence that people affect, if they don't like computers or they're stressed out, they affect the devices around them, including your phone, your printer, your laptop.
Oh
A
man.
software guy, when I was having problems with my computer, was an Apple IIc back in the 80s. The software is doing things that it was not supposed to be doing. And the guy from Broderbund said, "So how are you feeling right now?" Because I was in a rush and really frustrated from work and trying to get something done before going off to a meeting. And when I told him that, he said, "Okay, I want you to turn off your computer, go take a walk around the block, breathe, and then come back. And here's my direct line."
Oh
And
no.
we ended up in an hour and a half conversation about how often they have to tell people stuff like that.
Oh my. Oh, that's not good. No.
It's not
That
good,
that
but it's
makes
good.
me
I mean, it's good that people
yeah.
in that industry, some people actually recognize that that's the impact that we have on not only the people around us, but the things around us.
Yeah, and it makes me worried about what 5G is doing to our body, or what any of the electromagnetism stuff that we got going on, because everything gives off an electromagnetic signature. It's just how much is it affecting the antenna that is
Right.
our
That
body.
that yeah, and it's there's not even an agreement on how much the EM fields that come off of high tension wires affect people, other than it seems to trigger cancer in some people and not in others. So there's a genetic component here as well,
No.
as a predisposition. And the odds are that because evolution works like it does, that newer generations are probably not affected by it at all.
Yeah.
So
Darwin's always gonna win.
yeah,
Well, all right, Professor, thank you so much for talking to me. It was so
you're
nice
very
to,
welcome.
I enjoyed it a lot. I hope this was as fun for you as it was for
Yeah, it was
me.
a good talk. A little different than I normally have, which is great.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to me. I'll
You're
see
very
you
welcome.
later. Thank you so
Okay.
much. All right, bye-bye.